I never thought my neighbor's husband would die at 47. Robert Bennett collapsed in his driveway on a Monday morning while getting the mail. One minute he was standing there in his suit, the next minute paramedics were doing chest compressions on the concrete. He didn't make it to the hospital. My name is David Reynolds. I'm 29 and I work as a financial analyst from home in a quiet suburb outside Seattle. Before last week, my biggest problem was deciding what to order for dinner. I live in a 2-bedroom townhouse with beige walls and furniture I bought from a discount store. Nothing fancy. My life runs on routine. Wake up at 7, shower, make coffee, sit at my laptop, work through spreadsheets until my eyes hurt, eat something microwaved, watch a couple shows, then sleep. I do this 5 days a week, sometimes 6. My neighbors wave when they see me checking the mail. We talk about the weather or complain about the landscaping company. That's it. I've lived here 3 years and never been inside anyone else's home. I liked it that way. Simple. Predictable. No drama. Sarah Bennett lived right next door with her husband Robert. She's 34, with these warm hazel eyes and dark brown hair that falls just past her shoulders. There's something calm about her, like she's the kind of person who listens more than she talks. Robert was different. Always in a rush, always on his phone, always dressed like he had somewhere important to be. I'd see him leaving early in the morning, coming home late at night. Sometimes he'd be gone for days. Business trips, I assumed. Sarah and I would say hello when we crossed paths at the mailboxes or taking out trash. She'd smile and ask how my day was. I'd say fine, ask her the same. She'd say fine too. That was the extent of our relationship for 3 whole years. Just polite strangers sharing a property line. The day Robert died, I heard the sirens. I looked out my window and saw the ambulance, saw Sarah standing on her lawn in pajamas and a cardigan, her hand covering her mouth. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk. Someone brought her a chair. She sat there staring at nothing while the paramedics worked. I didn't go outside. I felt like I'd be intruding on something private. After they took Robert away, Sarah went inside her house. The door closed. I went back to my computer and tried to focus on work, but I kept glancing at her house through the window. All the lights were off except one in the kitchen. The funeral happened on Saturday. I saw cars lined up outside the church down the street. I thought about going but decided against it. I didn't really know Robert. Going felt wrong, like I'd be there just to be nosy. So I stayed home and cleaned my apartment, organized my desk, did laundry, anything to keep busy. Sunday came. I figured Sarah would have family staying with her, helping her through everything. I figured she'd be surrounded by people bringing casseroles and saying sorry for her loss. I was wrong. Sunday afternoon around 5 o'clock, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it and there stood Sarah. She wore a simple black dress that hung loose on her frame. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying for hours but had finally run out of tears. She held a white ceramic mug in both hands. Steam rose from whatever was inside. She looked at me and her voice came out quiet and shaky. David. I'm sorry to bother you. Can I come in for a minute? My brain froze for a second. This was the last thing I expected. Of course, I said, stepping aside. Come in. She walked past me into my living room and stood there looking around like she wasn't sure where to sit. I gestured to the couch. Please sit down. Can I get you anything? Water?
There.
She shook her head and sat on the edge of the couch cushion, still holding that mug. I made tea already. Thank you, though. I sat in the chair across from her and waited. I had no idea what to say. Sorry for your loss felt too formal. Are you okay felt like a stupid question. So I just sat there quietly. She stared down at her mug for what felt like forever. The steam kept rising, curling up toward the ceiling. Finally she spoke. It's too quiet over there. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Everyone left after the funeral. My sister went back to Portland this morning. Robert's brother flew back to Chicago. Now it's just me in that house and I can't stand the silence. Every room feels empty. I can't sit still. I can't focus. I tried reading, tried watching TV, nothing helps. I just keep walking from room to room waiting for something to happen, but nothing does. I nodded slowly. That sounds really hard. She looked up at me then, and I saw something in her eyes I wasn't expecting. Not just sadness. Something else. Relief, maybe. Like she was glad to be somewhere different. Talking to someone who wasn't trying to fix her or tell her it would be okay. I know this is weird, she continued. We barely know each other, but I didn't know where else to go. I couldn't stay in that house another minute. I leaned forward, resting my arms on my knees. It's not weird. You don't have to explain. She took a sip from her mug, then set it down on the coffee table. Her hands were shaking slightly. Can I tell you something? She asked. Of course. She took a breath. Robert and I weren't doing well. We hadn't been for a long time. The last 2 years especially. We barely talked. He was always working, always traveling. When he was home, he'd be in his office on calls or typing emails. We'd eat dinner in separate rooms. We stopped going to bed at the same time. I'd be asleep by the time he came upstairs, or he'd fall asleep on the couch and I wouldn't bother waking him. She paused, looking down at her hands. We were more like roommates than husband and wife. I kept thinking things would get better, that maybe after his next promotion or his next project we'd have time to reconnect. But it never happened. And now he's gone and I feel guilty because part of me already mourned this marriage a long time ago. I lost him emotionally before I lost him physically. Does that make me a terrible person? I shook my head. No. It makes you human. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She just blinked them back and picked up her mug again. We sat there for a while longer without talking. I didn't try to fill the silence with meaningless words. She didn't seem to need that. After about 10 minutes, she stood up. I should go. Thank you for letting me sit here. It helped more than you know. I walked her to the door. She turned before leaving and looked around my living room one more time. It feels warm here, she said softly. Safe. Then she walked across the grass back to her house. I watched her go inside and close the door behind her. I stood there for a minute before shutting my own door. Something felt different. I couldn't put my finger on exactly what, but the air felt heavier somehow, charged with something I didn't understand yet. That night, I couldn't focus on anything. I tried watching a movie but turned it off after 20 minutes. I tried reading but kept reading the same paragraph over and over without absorbing any of it. I kept thinking about Sarah sitting on my couch, about the way her voice cracked when she talked about her marriage, about how relieved she looked just to be somewhere different. I wondered if she was okay alone in that house. I wondered if I should have said something more helpful. But what could I have said? I barely knew her. Still, something about the whole interaction stuck with me in a way I couldn't shake. I woke up Monday morning feeling off. I made coffee and sat down at my laptop to start work, but couldn't concentrate on anything. Numbers blurred together on the screen. I'd read an email 3 times and still have no idea what it said. My mind kept drifting back to yesterday, to Sarah showing up at my door looking lost and exhausted. I kept wondering if she slept at all last night or if she spent the whole time wandering her empty house like she said. Around 11:30, I got up to refill my coffee when I heard a knock. My heart jumped a little. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Sarah stood there holding 2 paper bags with Marco's Cafe printed on the side. I opened the door. She looked different than yesterday. No black dress. She wore gray joggers and an oversized cream-colored sweater that hung off one shoulder. Her hair was in a messy bun. No makeup. She looked tired, but there was something softer about her expression. Hey, she said. I hope I'm not interrupting your work. I figured you probably forgot to eat lunch. I did too. Thought maybe we could eat together if that's okay. Before I could answer, she stepped inside like she'd done it 100 times before. Somehow it didn't feel strange. Felt natural. I got roast beef sandwiches, she said, heading toward my kitchen. And chips. And 2 iced teas. I didn't know what you liked, so I just guessed. I followed her. That sounds great. I actually did forget about lunch. She smiled a little. I had a feeling. We went out to my small deck in the backyard. The weather was cool and cloudy but not raining. We sat across from each other at the little table I bought last summer and never really used. She handed me a sandwich and we unwrapped them slowly, neither of us talking yet. I took a bite. She took a bite. We chewed in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was just quiet. After a few minutes she spoke. I barely slept last night, maybe 2 hours total. I kept hearing noises, the house settling, the fridge humming, the heater clicking on. Sounds I never noticed before. Without Robert there snoring or moving around, everything else seems so loud. I swallowed my food. That makes sense. Your brain is picking up on things it usually filters out. She nodded. I tried sleeping in the guest room, thinking maybe a different space would help, but that was worse. I ended up on the couch watching infomercials at 4 in the morning. She took another small bite of her sandwich and stared out at the trees beyond my fence. You know what's strange? I thought I'd feel devastated, like completely broken. I thought I'd wake up screaming or crying uncontrollably. But instead I just feel empty, like I'm watching someone else's life happen and I'm not really in it. I set my sandwich down. Grief is weird like that. It doesn't always show up the way you expect. She looked at me then, really looked at me. I've had this knot in my chest for so long, David. Even before Robert died. It started years ago when things between us changed. When we stopped seeing each other as partners and just became two people living separate lives under the same roof. Her voice got quieter. We used to be close. Really close. When we first got married, we'd stay up late talking about everything. Our dreams, our fears, stupid things that made us laugh. He'd come home from work and actually want to spend time with me. We'd cook dinner together, watch movies, go for walks. I felt seen. I felt important to him. She paused, picking at the edge of her sandwich wrapper. Then things shifted. His company promoted him. He started traveling more. First it was once a month, then twice a month, then every week. When he was home, he was exhausted or stressed or locked in his office preparing for the next trip. I tried to talk to him and he'd give me one-word answers while staring at his phone. I stopped trying after a while. What's the point of talking to someone who isn't listening? I listened without interrupting. She needed to get this out. We started eating separately, she continued. I'd make dinner and he'd take his plate to his office. Or he'd eat before coming home and I'd eat alone at the table. We slept in the same bed, but we might as well have been in different houses. He'd come to bed after I was already asleep. He'd leave before I woke up. Sometimes days would go by where we barely saw each other even though we lived together. She looked at me with glassy eyes. Have you ever felt like you're disappearing inside your own home? Like you're there but nobody notices? Nobody asks how you are or what you're thinking or if you're okay. I nodded. I think most people feel invisible at some point. Maybe not in the same way, but everyone knows what it's like to feel unseen. She let out a long breath.
I'm sorry.
I'm dumping all this on you and we barely know each other. I shook my head. Don't apologize. Sometimes you just need someone willing to listen without judging. A small smile crossed her face. Thank you for that. We finished eating and then just sat there for a while. The conversation shifted to lighter things. She asked what I did for work. I told her about analyzing financial data and how boring it sounds, but I actually liked the puzzle of it. She told me she used to work as a teacher but stopped a few years ago when Robert's income made it unnecessary. She missed it sometimes. Missed the kids and the structure of having somewhere to be every day. I told her about the time I accidentally replied all to a company email that was meant just for my boss. The email said LOL okay, in response to a very serious budget proposal. My boss called me immediately and I had to explain it was meant for a friend texting me, not for the 60 people copied on that email. Sarah laughed, really laughed, and it was the first time I'd seen genuine joy on her face. That's mortifying, she said, still smiling. I would have quit immediately. I thought about it, I admitted. But then I figured everyone would forget eventually. They didn't though. People brought it up for months. She laughed again and I felt something warm in my chest. Making her laugh felt like an accomplishment. We kept talking, trading stories about embarrassing moments and favorite foods and places we'd like to travel someday. At one point her hand rested on the table near mine. Our fingers were maybe 2 inches apart. Then her pinky moved slightly and brushed against my hand. It stayed there for just a second, barely touching, before she pulled it back. The air between us shifted. Her face changed. She looked down at her lap. "I should probably go," she said suddenly, standing up. "This is happening fast. Too fast. I don't want you to think I'm using you as some kind of emotional escape because I can't handle being alone." I stood too. "I don't think that." She hesitated, looking toward my back door. "I couldn't face another afternoon in that house by myself. That's the only reason I came. I needed to be somewhere else. Somewhere that didn't remind me of everything." I took a step closer. "Then don't go back yet. Stay as long as you need." She looked up at me and her eyes were different now. Uncertain but also hopeful. "I don't want to overstay. I don't want to become a burden." "You're not a burden, Sarah. I mean that." She stood there for another moment, then nodded. "Okay, maybe I'll stay a little longer." She didn't leave that afternoon. We moved back inside when the air got too cold and she curled up on one end of my couch with her legs tucked under her. I sat on the other end, close enough to talk comfortably but far enough to give her space. We spent the next 2 hours just existing together. Sometimes we talked about random things like our favorite seasons or what pets we had growing up. Other times we sat in silence while some cooking show played on TV that neither of us really watched. Around 6 o'clock her phone buzzed. She looked at it and sighed. "My sister," she said, "checking on me for the 3rd time today." She typed a quick response and put the phone face down on the couch. "She means well, but I can't handle everyone asking if I'm okay every 5 minutes. I'm not okay. Saying I'm fine over and over doesn't make it true." I understood that. Sometimes people don't want to be asked how they are. They just want to not think about it for a while. As the sky outside started turning dark, I noticed she kept glancing toward the window facing her house. Her expression changed each time, like she was dreading something. "You're welcome to stay for dinner," I offered. "I was going to make spaghetti. Nothing fancy, but there's plenty." She looked relieved. "Are you sure? I feel like I've already taken up your whole day." "I wouldn't offer if I didn't mean it." She smiled. "Then yes, I'd like that." We moved into the kitchen together. I boiled water for pasta while she rinsed vegetables for a salad. We worked around each other easily, like we'd done this before. She told me about a trip she took to Italy 5 years ago where she learned to make homemade pasta from an old woman in a tiny village. "Best food I ever ate," she said, chopping a cucumber. Robert spent the whole trip on conference calls. We flew all the way to Italy and he saw the inside of hotel rooms and nothing else. There was sadness in her voice but also frustration. I spent most of that week exploring alone. I didn't mind really. I got to see what I wanted without rushing. But it would have been nice to share it with someone. Dinner was quiet and comfortable. We sat at my small kitchen table and she told me more about her life before Robert got so consumed by work. She talked about teaching 2nd grade, about the kids who would bring her drawings and rocks they found on the playground. She talked about how she wanted to go back to it someday but wasn't sure when. "Do you miss it?" I asked. "Every day," she said. "I miss having a purpose outside of keeping a house clean that nobody's ever in." After we finished eating, she helped me wash dishes. Our hands bumped in the soapy water once and she pulled back quickly like she'd touched something hot. "Sorry," she said. "No need to be sorry." She dried the last plate and set it on the counter. Then she just stood there, staring out my kitchen window into the darkness. "I don't want to go home tonight," she said quietly. My stomach flipped. "Okay." She turned to look at me. "I know that sounds crazy. We barely know each other and I'm asking to stay in your house. But I can't go back there yet. I can't walk into that bedroom we shared and see his things still on the nightstand. I can't sleep in that bed alone." I could see she was serious. This wasn't dramatic or manipulative. She genuinely couldn't handle being in that space. "You can take the guest room," I said. "I'll get you clean sheets and towels." Her eyes filled up. "You'd really do that?" "Of course." She stepped forward and hugged me. It happened fast and caught me off guard, but I hugged her back. She pressed her face into my shoulder, and I felt her whole body relax like she'd been holding tension for days and finally let it go. We stood there like that for maybe 30 seconds, neither of us moving. When she pulled back, her cheeks were wet, but she was smiling slightly. Thank you, David. You have no idea what this means. I showed her to the guest room down the hall and pulled fresh sheets from the closet. She sat on the edge of the bed while I made it up for her. I feel like I should explain more, she said. You don't have to. I want to though. She took a breath. When Robert died, everyone expected me to fall apart. His family, my family, our friends. They all watched me at the funeral waiting for me to break down. But I didn't. I cried a little but mostly I just felt numb. And then I felt guilty for not feeling worse. She twisted her hands together. The truth is I've been grieving our marriage for 2 years. I grieved it when he missed our anniversary dinner because of a last-minute meeting. I grieved it when he stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings. I grieved it every night I ate dinner alone while he worked upstairs. By the time he died, there wasn't much left to grieve. We were already over. His death just made it official. I sat down next to her on the bed. That doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't it though? My husband just died and I'm sitting in another man's house feeling more comfortable than I've felt in years. What does that say about me? I thought about that. It says you're human. It says you needed connection and you found it. There's nothing wrong with that. She looked at me with those hazel eyes and I saw something shift in them. Not sadness anymore. Something else. Something I wasn't sure I was ready for but couldn't look away from. I didn't expect this, she whispered. Didn't expect what? To feel drawn to someone so soon. To feel like I can breathe around you when I can't breathe anywhere else. My heart started beating faster. The air in the room felt thicker. I didn't expect it either, I admitted. She leaned closer. Not much, just a few inches, but enough that I noticed. Is this wrong? She asked. I don't know. Should we stop talking like this? Probably, but neither of us moved. We just sat there on the edge of the guest bed looking at each other while something unspoken hung between us. Finally she stood up. I should get some sleep. It's been a long day. I stood too. Right? Yeah. Let me know if you need anything. She nodded. Good night, David. Good night, Sarah. I left the room and closed the door behind me. I stood in the hallway for a minute trying to process what just happened. Nothing actually happened. We didn't kiss. We didn't even touch except for that hug in the kitchen. But something definitely shifted. I went to my own room and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I could hear her moving around in the guest room. Water running in the bathroom. The bed creaking as she got in. Then silence. I wondered if she was lying awake too. Thinking about the same things I was thinking about. Wondering what we were doing. Wondering if this was a mistake or the start of something neither of us planned but both of us needed. I woke up before sunrise. My eyes just opened at 5:30 and I knew I wouldn't fall back asleep. I lay there listening to the quiet house. No sounds from the guest room. I got up carefully and went to the kitchen. The coffee maker seemed loud in the silence, but I needed it. While it brewed, I stood at the window watching the sky slowly turn from black to deep blue to pale gray. My mind raced with thoughts I couldn't organize. What was Sarah doing here? What was I doing letting her stay? We barely knew each other. Her husband just died. This was too much too fast. But at the same time it didn't feel wrong. It felt like exactly what both of us needed even if we couldn't explain why. I poured coffee into 2 mugs just as I heard her door open. She appeared in the hallway wrapped in the spare blanket from the closet. Her hair messy from sleep, eyes tired but clear. You're up early, she said softly. Couldn't sleep much. Me neither. I handed her a mug and we stood there in the kitchen sipping coffee while the sky continued getting lighter outside. No words for a few minutes. Just the sound of us breathing and the occasional sip. I have no idea what I'm doing, she finally said. I looked at her. What do you mean? This, being here, running away from my own house like a scared kid. Relying on someone I barely know because I can't face being alone. She set her mug down on the counter. I'm 34 years old. I should be able to handle this. But I can't. And I don't know what that says about me. I put my mug down too. It says you're going through something horrible and you're trying to survive it the best way you know how. That's not weakness. She looked down. It feels like weakness. It's not. We stood there facing each other across the small kitchen. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Can I tell you something else?" she asked. "Of course. Robert and I stopped being a real couple 2 years ago. Maybe longer. We lived together, shared bills, showed up to family events together. On paper, we were married. But emotionally, we were strangers. I'd try to talk to him about my day, and he'd say, without looking up from his phone. I'd suggest we take a weekend trip somewhere, and he'd say he was too busy. I'd ask if he still loved me, and he'd say of course, but never actually show it." Her voice got quieter. "I thought about leaving him. Multiple times. I'd look at apartments online. I'd calculate how much money I'd need to start over. But I never did it. I kept thinking maybe things would get better. Maybe after his next promotion he'd have more time. Maybe after the holidays we'd reconnect. But it never happened. And then he died, and I felt relieved and guilty at the same time because part of me was glad I didn't have to make that choice anymore. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just listened. Now I'm here," she continued, "in your house, and I feel more at peace than I've felt in years. I can breathe. I can think. I don't feel like I'm suffocating under the weight of a broken marriage. And that scares me because it's too soon to feel this okay. People don't bounce back this fast. Something must be wrong with me." I stepped closer. "Nothing is wrong with you, Sarah. You're not bouncing back. You're just finding a place where you can exist without everything hurting all the time. That's different." She looked up at me. "Is it?" "Yes." We stayed like that for a moment, standing close but not touching, just looking at each other. Then she said, "I'm going to stay here today too, if that's still okay." "It's okay." And she did stay. The whole day. We made breakfast together, scrambled eggs and toast. We sat on the couch and she read a book while I caught up on work emails. Around noon, we took a walk around the neighborhood. We didn't talk much during the walk, just moved side by side down the sidewalk past other houses and parked cars and people mowing lawns. At one point, our hands swung close enough that our knuckles brushed. Neither of us pulled away, but we didn't grab hold either. We just let it happen and then kept walking. That evening, I made us spaghetti again because it was easy and we both liked it. We ate outside on the deck even though it was chilly. She wrapped herself in a blanket and we talked about movies we loved and books we'd read and places we wanted to visit someday. "I've always wanted to see Alaska," she said. "The northern lights, the mountains, all that open space. I want to see New Zealand," I said. "It looks like another planet in pictures." She smiled. "Maybe we'll both get there someday." After dinner, we ended up back on the couch. Some nature documentary played on the TV, but neither of us paid attention. She sat closer this time, her shoulder almost touching mine. She held a cup of tea in both hands and stared at the steam rising from it. "It's strange," she said quietly. "What is?" "Feeling peaceful. I haven't felt this way in so long I almost forgot what it was like." I turned slightly toward her. "You don't have to rush anything. There's no timeline for this." She set her tea down on the coffee table. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, and something passed between us that neither of us said out loud. "Do you think it's wrong that I don't feel guilty being here?" she asked. "No. I think you're doing what you need to do. That's not wrong." She leaned her head against my shoulder. Slowly, carefully, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed. I didn't move away. I let her rest there, and after a second I put my arm around her. Not pulling her closer, not pushing for anything, just holding her steady. We sat like that for a long time. Her breathing slowed. My breathing slowed. The documentary kept playing, but we weren't watching anymore. Then she shifted and looked up at me. Our faces were close. Closer than they'd been before. I could see the small scar above her left eyebrow, the tiny flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. She leaned in, just a little, testing, waiting to see what I'd do. I didn't pull back. Her lips touched mine, soft and uncertain, like a question she wasn't sure she should ask. We kissed once, gentle, brief. Then she pulled back and looked down.
"I'm sorry."
"Don't be. This is too fast. Too soon. I shouldn't have done that." I lifted her chin gently so she'd look at me. "You don't have to apologize." She searched my face for something. Permission, maybe. Understanding. Then she leaned against my chest and I held her there while we both tried to figure out what we'd just started. We didn't kiss again that night. We just sat together in the quiet until she fell asleep against me. I stayed still, not wanting to wake her, thinking about everything that led to this moment. Two people who barely knew each other a week ago, now sitting in the dark holding onto each other like we'd drown if we let go. Eventually I shifted carefully and she woke up. "Sorry," she mumbled. "I didn't mean to fall asleep on you. It's fine. You should get some actual sleep though. In a real bed." She nodded and stood up slowly. Before going to the guest room, she turned back. "Thank you, David, for everything. For not judging me. For letting me be here. For making me feel human again. You don't have to thank me." She smiled, tired but genuine, then disappeared down the hall. I sat there alone for a while thinking about what came next, knowing that whatever it was, we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross, and neither of us wanted to.